Okay, so you want to own a theme park. You buy the land, build the rides, sell the tickets, and watch families hand you their money all summer long. Sounds like the most fun business in the world. But here's the strange part. Theme parks are one of the few businesses where you can sell out every single day and still go broke. Disney spent over $5 billion building Disney's Animal Kingdom. Six Flags filed for bankruptcy twice, the second time with $4 billion in debt. And yet, the top parks in the world generate more revenue per square foot than almost any retail business on earth. So, by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how the money flows through a theme park, why the ticket price is almost a decoy, and what it actually takes to build one of these things and not lose everything. Let's start with a number that stops most people cold. So, what does it actually cost to get into this business? If you want to build a major destination theme park from scratch, you're starting at around $1 billion. That's before a single guest walks through the gate. Disney's Magic Kingdom cost about $800 million to build when it opened in 1971. Adjusted for inflation, that's roughly $6 billion today. Universal's Epic Universe, opening in Orlando in 2025, is reported to have cost around $5 billion to construct. Now, you don't have to go that big. A regional amusement park, the kind you'd find in a mid-sized city with 10 to 20 rides, typically costs between $50 and $200 million to build. A single major roller coaster alone can cost between $20 and $40 million. That's one ride. Land is its own monster. Disney owns about 40 square miles of property around Walt Disney World, roughly the size of San Francisco. They bought most of it in the 1960s for around $5 million using shell companies, so no one knew Disney was buying. Today, that land is worth tens of billions. If you're starting fresh, land near a major metro area can run $10 to $50 million per acre, depending on where you are. Then you've got infrastructure, roads, parking, utilities, sewage systems. A park the size of a typical Six Flags property needs its own grid-scale electrical system and water treatment plant. You also need to spend on permits, environmental studies, and years of approvals before you break ground. Busch Gardens. Tampa spent 7 years in planning and permitting before construction started on a major expansion. So the realistic entry price for a serious regional park, $150 to $300 million. For a destination park that people fly to, $1 billion and up. Okay, so how does a theme park actually make money? The obvious answer is tickets. And yes, tickets matter. A single-day ticket to Walt Disney World now starts at around $109 and can exceed $200 on peak days with dynamic pricing. Universal Orlando runs a similar range. A mid-tier regional park like Cedar Point in Ohio charges around $60 to $90 per day. But here's what most people miss. Ticket revenue is often not the biggest line on the income statement. At Disney, tickets account for roughly 40% of total park revenue. The other 60% comes from food, merchandise, hotels, parking, and premium experiences. That's the actual model. The ticket gets you in the door. Everything inside the gate is where the real margin lives. A family of 4 at Walt Disney World spends an average of around $600 per day total, not counting the hotel. The ticket might be $400 of that. The other $200 is lunch, a souvenir, a photo package, and one lightning lane pass because nobody wants to wait 90 minutes for a ride. Food margins at theme parks are extraordinary. A bottle of water that costs 20 cents to produce sells for $5. A turkey leg that costs about $2 in materials sells for $14. Sit-down restaurant meals inside the park run $50 to $80 per person. Food and beverage margins inside a theme park can hit 70 to 80%. Merchandise is similar. A logo t-shirt that costs $3 to manufacture sells for $35. Disney's consumer products division, which includes park merchandise, generated about $6 billion in revenue in recent years. Then there's the hotel layer. And this is where destination parks really separate themselves. If you own the hotel attached to the park, you capture the guest's entire budget. Room, food, tickets, everything. Disney has over 30,000 hotel rooms on its Florida property alone. Average nightly rate at a Disney resort hotel runs between $300 and $800 depending on the property tier. Occupancy rates at Disney resort hotels typically run above 90%, which is extraordinary in the hotel industry where 70% is considered very good. The resort model turns a theme park into something closer to a closed economy. Guests arrive, they stay on property, they eat on property, they shop on property, and they never really need to leave. Every dollar they spend goes to the same company. The whole business in one line. You sell the entry cheap enough to fill the park. Then you sell everything else at margins that would make a convenience store blush. Now, what's the stuff nobody tells you about when you're building this thing? The maintenance bill. Rides are mechanical systems running 8 to 12 hours a day, 300 days a year, in every weather condition. A single major roller coaster requires daily inspections, weekly maintenance cycles, and a full annual teardown. Industry estimates put annual maintenance costs at between 5 and 10% of the park's total asset value per year. For a park with $500 million in rides and infrastructure, that's $25 to $50 million a year just to keep things running. And rides have a lifespan. Most major attractions need a full refurbishment or replacement every 15 to 25 years. You're not just maintaining a building, you're maintaining a fleet of machines, and they all age at the same time. Staffing is the other number that hits hard. A park with 20,000 daily visitors needs somewhere between 2 and 5,000 employees on a busy day. That includes ride operators, food staff, security, maintenance crews, costume characters, and parking attendants. Walt Disney World employs over 70,000 people across its Florida resort, making it the largest single-site employer in the United States. Payroll for a mid-sized regional park can easily run $40 to $80 million per year. Then there's seasonality. Most regional parks in North America operate for only 5 to 7 months of the year due to weather. But your fixed costs, your loan payments, your maintenance schedules, your corporate overhead, those run 12 months. You earn your entire year's revenue in about half the calendar year. That math creates intense pressure on peak summer weekends, which are the only days that truly matter for a seasonal park survival. Insurance is another cost that most outsiders underestimate. A park with thrill rides carries significant liability exposure. A single serious accident, even one found to be the guest's fault, can trigger years of litigation and eight-figure legal costs. Insurance premiums for a mid-sized park often run in the range of $5 to $15 million per year. And then there's the reinvestment treadmill. Guests don't come back to the same park year after year if nothing changes. The industry rule of thumb is that you need to open one significant new attraction every 2 to 3 years just to sustain attendance. Not grow it. Sustain it. A major new ride costs $20 to $40 million. A new land or immersive area costs several hundred million. So you're spending a massive amount of money to essentially run in place. So who's actually doing this, and what does it look like in practice? Let's start with the biggest win in theme park history. Walt Disney World opened in Orlando, Florida in October 1971. It cost about $400 million to build, equivalent to roughly $3 billion today. In its first year, it drew 10 million visitors. Today, Walt Disney World draws roughly 50 to 55 million visitors per year across its 4 theme parks. Disney's Parks, Experiences and Products segment generated about $32 billion in revenue in fiscal year 2023. Operating income from that segment was around $8.4 billion. That's a margin of about 26% on a $32 billion revenue base. Disney's Parks business is now the most profitable division of the entire company, more profitable than their streaming service, more profitable than their film studio. The key move Disney made that no competitor has fully replicated: buying the land first, at scale, in secret. Because Disney controlled 40 square miles of land with its own government-like authority, called the Reedy Creek Improvement District, it could build hotels, roads, utilities, and expansions without dealing with outside zoning authorities. That structural advantage compounded over 50 years into an almost unbeatable moat. Now, for the other side of the story, Six Flags is the cautionary tale that every regional park operator should study. At its peak in the mid-2000s, Six Flags operated 30 parks across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. The company had been buying parks aggressively since the 1990s, often at inflated prices, financed with heavy debt. By 2009, Six Flags had accumulated roughly $2 billion in debt and filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The parks themselves were profitable in an operating sense. The business worked. But the debt load was so heavy that the operating profits couldn't cover the interest payments. They emerged from bankruptcy in 2010, restructured, and eventually stabilized. Then in 2024, Six Flags merged with Cedar Fair in a deal that created a company with 42 parks and about $3 billion in annual revenue. The lesson from Six Flags isn't that regional parks don't work. It's that buying them with too much borrowed money is a different bet entirely. And one bad season, or one recession, or one pandemic removes your margin for error completely. Speaking of which, COVID-19 hit theme parks harder than almost any other industry. Walt Disney World was closed for over 3 months in 2020. the first time it had been closed since Hurricane Floyd in 1999. Disney's Parks division swung from a $6 billion operating profit in 2019 to a loss of more than $1 billion in 2020. Comcast's Universal Parks lost roughly $3 billion in revenue that year. Smaller independent parks that didn't have a corporate parent with a balance sheet simply didn't reopen. Dozens of regional parks permanently closed between 2020 and 2022. Now let's look at a different kind of success story, a much smaller scale operation. Holiday World, located in Santa Claus, Indiana, is a family-owned park that has operated since 1946. It's not a Disney-scale operation. It draws about 1 million visitors per year. But it has been profitable for most of its history and is consistently ranked among the best regional parks in the country by enthusiast groups. The key to its model, it charges a flat admission price that includes free soft drinks and free parking, things that competitors monetize separately. That positioning created strong word of mouth and loyalty, which kept marketing costs lower than the industry average. It's a textbook example of a well-run regional park, one that doesn't overextend, reinvests steadily, and builds a real local and regional fan base rather than chasing national scale. So how do people lose everything on this? The failure pattern in theme parks is almost always the same: overpaying for growth with borrowed money. The logic seems sound. You buy a park, you add a new ride, attendance goes up, revenue goes up. You borrow more to buy another park. The problem is that theme parks have high fixed costs and seasonal cash flows, which means they need room to absorb a bad year. When you load them with debt, you eliminate that room. Astroworld in Houston, the beloved Six Flags park that opened in 1968, was closed permanently in 2005. The official reason was that the land was worth more as real estate than as a park, but the underlying reason was that the parent company, Six Flags at the time, needed cash and couldn't justify reinvesting in a park that sat on increasingly valuable Houston real estate. The community was devastated. The land sat empty for years before any development happened. What killed Astroworld wasn't bad management at the park level. It was a financial structure that made the park's future conditional on things that had nothing to do with how well the park ran. That's the trap. You can run a great park and still lose it. Okay, so what can you actually make with one of these things? Let's run two scenarios, a regional park and a destination park, with real math. Scenario 1. You build a solid regional park. You spend $150 million to develop it, including land, rides, infrastructure, and working capital. You finance it with $75 million in equity and $75 million in debt at 6% interest. That's $4.5 million per year in interest costs. Your park draws 600,000 visitors per year. Average ticket price is $60. That's $36 million in ticket revenue. Average in-park spend per visitor, including food and merchandise, is $40. That's $24 million more. Total revenue, $60 million. Now costs, payroll for seasonal and year-round staff, roughly $22 million. Maintenance and capital reinvestment, $8 million. Insurance, marketing, utilities, and overhead, $10 million. Total operating costs, $40 million. Operating profit before debt, $20 million. Operating profit before debt, $20 million. Subtract the $4.5 million in interest. Net profit, roughly $15 to $16 million. That's about a 10 to 11% net margin on $60 million in revenue. Not a software company, but for a capital-intensive physical business, that's a real and sustainable result. Payback period on your initial investment, roughly 10 years if you reinvest conservatively and manage debt carefully. Scenario 2. You're operating at Disney or Universal scale. You've spent $5 billion building a destination resort with one major theme park, two smaller parks, multiple hotels, and a shopping district. You draw 10 million visitors per year to the main park and another 4 million across the supplementary properties. Average revenue per visitor across all channels, tickets, food, hotels, merchandise, is around $350. Total revenue, roughly $4 to $5 billion per year from the resort. Operating margin at this scale, based on Disney's actual reported figures, runs around 25 to 30%. That's $1 to $1.5 billion in operating income per year. At that level, you recover your $5 billion capital investment in roughly 4 to 5 years of operating profit, and the asset keeps appreciating. The land, the IP, the hotel network, all of it compounds in value as the brand grows. The difference between these two scenarios isn't just money, it's moat. A regional park competes with every other regional attraction in a day drive radius. A destination park competes with nobody, because you don't go to Walt Disney World, because there's nothing else to do. You go because it's Walt Disney World. That brand is worth more than the rides. So here's where you land. A well-run regional theme park with smart debt management and a loyal local audience can generate 10 to 15% net margins and pay back its construction cost in 10 to 12 years. A destination resort at full scale can generate north of $1 billion in operating income per year, with payback periods under 5 years once it hits full attendance. The risk that kills people in this industry isn't the operating model. The operating model works. The risk is the capital structure. Too much debt, too little runway, and one bad summer away from a bankruptcy filing. Disney didn't become Disney because they built better rides. They became Disney because they owned the land, controlled the hotels, captured every dollar the guests spent, and had a balance sheet big enough to survive the years that went sideways. So yes, you can own a theme park and make real money. You just have to understand that the ride people are really paying for isn't the roller coaster. It's the whole experience you've built around it, and building that takes a lot longer and costs a lot more than anyone standing at the front gate ever suspects.